Welcome to Ghostlore Chronicles, where the shadows whisper, the walls remember, and the unseen watches. Tonight, we journey into the chilling legend of the Briarwood Hotel, a place where invisible hands tuck guests into bed, where a woman in white roams endlessly, and where reality twists into nightmare. Are you ready to step inside and face what lurks in the darkness? My name doesn't really matter. What matters is the city. Chicago, the city of steel and shadows. It never really sleeps, no matter what people say. By day, it's alive with voices, trains, and the constant hum of ambition. But by night, it feels like something else. Something older. The alleys stretch darker. The wind howls differently through the streets, and the silence between footsteps grows heavier. Like the city itself is waiting for something to happen. I've lived here most of my life, and yet, I never really knew the stories. The ones whispered in late-night bars, on CTA trains rattling past midnight, or in corner diners where the neon buzzes like a broken insect. Ghost stories, urban legends, things everyone swears they know a friend of a friend who saw. For years, I dismissed them as nonsense. But then, I started digging deeper. It began with a job. I was a freelance journalist, looking for work, and a small online magazine hired me to do a series of features on local legends. A fluff piece, I thought. Easy clicks. The editor told me to make it spooky, add some flair, maybe throw in a grainy photo or two. I wasn't a believer. I wasn't even scared. Not at first. But the more I dug, the stranger things became. The first name that kept coming up was Hotel Briarwood. An old building, no longer in operation, standing abandoned just a few blocks west of the Loop. It was once a glamorous place, a shining jewel in the 1920s, when mobsters and movie stars passed through its grand lobby. But the place had a reputation, a bad one. People spoke of strange accidents, unexplained deaths, and more than one guest who checked in but never checked out. I thought it was perfect for my article. But when I told people I was planning to spend the night inside, their expressions shifted. Some laughed nervously, some shook their heads, but a few, just a few, gave me this look, a hollow kind of pity, like they knew something I didn't. One of them was Marta, a waitress at a diner I frequented. She leaned in close and whispered, "If you're really going to Briarwood, don't take the elevator. Whatever you do, don't." Her hands shook as she poured my coffee. When I asked why, she just said, "Because it doesn't always stop where it should." That was the first thread. And once I pulled on it, the whole city seemed to unravel. The night I went to the hotel, the streets were wet with rain, the kind that leaves the pavement shining like a black mirror. I carried a recorder, a flashlight, and a notebook. That's all. The Briarwood loomed against the skyline, its windows like dead eyes. The front doors had been boarded shut, but I found a side entrance where someone had pried the boards loose. Inside, the air smelled of mold, dust, and something faintly metallic. My flashlight beam sliced across the lobby. The chandeliers hung crooked, their crystals missing or broken. The marble floor was cracked and littered with debris. But strangest of all was the silence. Not the kind you expect in an abandoned place. This silence felt thick, unnatural, like it pressed against your ears. I set up my recorder on the dusty front desk and started speaking, half for my article, half to convince myself I wasn't afraid. "This is the Hotel Briarwood," I said. "It's been abandoned for nearly 40 years. Local legends claim that the hotel is haunted by multiple spirits, most famously a woman in white seen wandering the upper floors, and an elevator that takes people where they don't belong." As my own voice echoed back, I swore I heard something else, like a whisper overlapping my words. I replayed the recording immediately. My voice came through clear, but under it, faint, almost too faint to catch, was another voice. Female, breathless. It said, "Don't stay. I should have left then." Any sane person would have, but I told myself it was just interference. Static, maybe even my imagination. I pushed deeper into the hotel. The hallways were lined with faded wallpaper, curling at the edges like old scabs. Every door was shut tight, numbers tarnished, some missing entirely. I shone the flashlight down the hall, and for a second, I thought I saw movement, a figure turning the corner. When I followed, the hallway was empty. On the second floor, I found room 210. The door hung slightly open. Inside, the room looked almost preserved. The bed was still made, sheets yellowed but neatly tucked. A vanity mirror stood in the corner, cracked down the center. I lifted the recorder again and spoke. "This is room 210. Local legend says a woman was found dead here in 1954. They say she still lingers, unable to leave." I lowered the recorder, and the air grew icy cold. My breath came out in pale white clouds. The flashlight flickered once, then steadied. And then, without warning, the bed creaked. I froze. The sheets moved, slowly, deliberately, as though invisible hands were tucking them down, smoothing them over. The indentation of a body formed on the mattress, right before my eyes. My heart slammed in my chest. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The mirror in the corner reflected it all, the bed, the sheets, and in that reflection I saw her. A woman in a white dress, pale, hollow eyes, standing at the foot of the bed, staring straight at me. But when I spun around, there was no one there. I ran. God help me. I ran down those halls like a coward, flashlight beam jerking wildly over the peeling walls and shattered glass. I made it to the elevator, punched the button without thinking. The doors slid open with a groan. I stepped inside, panting, sweat cold on my skin. I pressed L for lobby. The elevator shuddered, then began to descend. First, it was fine, just the hum of old machinery. But then it didn't stop. The indicator light passed L and kept going. Down past the basement, down into levels that shouldn't exist. The hum grew louder, deeper, vibrating through my bones. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in red emergency glow. The numbers above the door blinked in nonsense patterns. I tried hitting buttons, slamming the emergency stop, but nothing worked. And then the elevator slowed, dinged softly. The doors opened. What lay beyond was no basement. It was a hallway, long, endless, lined with doors, every one identical, every one unmarked. The air smelled of rot, of earth, like I had stepped into a crypt. I didn't step out, couldn't. Something inside me screamed not to, but from that darkness I heard them, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer, and a voice, that same breathless whisper I had caught on the recorder. Closer now, louder. "Don't stay." The doors slammed shut, trapping me inside again. The elevator shot upward, rattling violently, until it spat me back onto the lobby floor. I collapsed onto the cracked marble, gasping for air. When I looked back, the elevator doors were gone. Nothing but a blank wall of stained wallpaper. That was just the beginning. I left the hotel that night, but the hotel didn't leave me. My recorder had captured more than I realized. And when I played it back later, it wasn't just whispers. It was screams. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment with the blinds drawn tight, replaying the recording again and again. Each time, I heard something new. At first, it was the woman's whisper, soft, pleading, "Don't stay." But layered beneath that, almost too distorted to make sense, were other sounds. Muffled cries, doors slamming, a deep, hollow groan like metal bending under immense weight. And then, the scream. It wasn't just fear in that scream, it was anguish. The kind of sound that digs into your bones and refuses to leave. I shut the recorder off, but the scream stayed in my head. When I finally managed to close my eyes, it was waiting for me in my dreams. I saw that hallway again, the one the elevator had opened onto. Endless doors, darkness stretching forever, and behind each door, something alive. Something that wanted me. By morning, I told myself I needed to treat this like any other assignment. Investigate, gather facts, interview people, write the story. If I thought of it like work, maybe I could keep my sanity. So I started with interviews. The first was Marta, the waitress who had warned me about the elevator. When I returned to the diner, her face paled as soon as she saw me. She didn't even wait for me to order. She just poured the coffee and slid into the booth across from me. "You went, didn't you?" she said. I nodded. She didn't look surprised. "I told you not to." Her voice trembled. "People who go inside, they don't come back the same." I asked her what she meant, and after a long silence, she told me her brother had once broken into the hotel with friends back in the 90s. Only 2 of them came out. "They said the walls moved," she whispered. "Said the building swallowed the others. They found one of the boys weeks later, in an alley on the south side. His body was—" She stopped herself. Her hands shook as she gripped the coffee pot. "They said he looked like he'd been dead for years, but he'd only been missing a week." Her eyes met mine and she added, "My brother never spoke again. He's alive, but it's like part of him stayed there." Her words settled over me like a shroud. From there, I tracked down old articles, digging through library archives and microfilm reels. The Briarwood's history was darker than I expected. In the 1920s, it had been a favorite hangout for mobsters. There were rumors of bodies buried in the walls, of hitmen who used the rooms for their bloody work. In the 1950s, there were reports of suicides, overdoses, and unexplained accidents. A bellhop crushed in an elevator shaft. A maid who vanished without a trace. Guests who died in their sleep with no signs of struggle or illness. Room 210 came up again and again. The woman in white had been real. Her name was Evelyn Crane. A traveling singer who checked in one summer and never checked out. The papers called it natural causes, but some accounts suggested otherwise. Neighbors claimed they'd heard her screaming the night before. The deeper I dug, the more threads I found connecting Evelyn to others. Survivors of the hotel spoke of a woman who tried to warn them, appearing at the edge of their vision or in cracked mirrors. Some believed she wasn't the danger. She was trying to protect them from something else. By the time the sun set, I had a notebook full of names, dates, and half-legends. But one thing became clear. People who encountered the Briarwood all described the same sensation. A heaviness, a feeling of being watched. A pull like the hotel itself was alive and hungry. That night, back in my apartment, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I would sort through the notes in the morning. But sleep never came, because I wasn't alone. At first, it was little things. The lamp on my desk flickering even though the bulb was new. The sound of faint footsteps in the hall outside my door, even at 3 in the morning. I got up once, opened the door, and of course no one was there. But the worst was the bed. I had just lain down when the mattress shifted, slow and deliberate, as though someone else had sunk onto it beside me. The sheets tugged tight against my legs. My breath caught in my throat. I turned my head, heart hammering, and in the faint glow from the streetlight outside, I saw the indentation. A shape lying there, right next to me. I bolted upright, scrambling off the bed. The indentation remained for a second longer, then smoothed itself out, as though invisible hands were pulling the sheets straight. I grabbed my recorder on instinct and hit record. My voice trembled as I spoke. This is happening outside the hotel now. In my apartment. The bed. Something was in the bed. The silence that followed was unbearable. I shut it off, hands shaking, and forced myself to stay awake until the sun rose. But when I played the tape back the next day, my blood ran cold. Because after my words, clear as day, I heard breathing. Not mine. Not human. Slow, ragged, rasping. And then the whisper again. Closer than ever. Don't stay. But this time, it wasn't just a warning. Sounded like a command. A desperate one. And for the first time, I wondered if leaving the hotel had even mattered. Because maybe it had followed me home. I tried to convince myself it was stress. Lack of sleep. Maybe even some trick of the mind. That's what I told myself as I sat in the morning light, staring at the tape recorder like it might come alive. But deep down, I knew better. The Briarwood had reached past its walls. Whatever lived in that hotel wasn't bound to it anymore. It had found me. I decided to meet someone who might understand. There was a retired cop named Frank Delaney, whose name kept popping up in old police reports connected to the hotel. Most of the cases he worked on were filed under unexplained, no evidence, or unsolved. It took some calling around, But eventually, I found him living alone in a cramped apartment on the west side. When I knocked, the door opened just enough for one pale blue eye to stare at me. "You a reporter?" he asked, his voice like gravel. "Not exactly," I said. "I'm investigating the Briarwood." The door shut in my face. I thought that was the end of it, but just as I turned to leave, I heard the chain slide. The door cracked open again, wider this time. "You've been inside, haven't you?" Frank said. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "I can see it in your eyes. You've got that look." I stepped inside. His place was cluttered, stacks of newspapers, folders, empty whiskey bottles. On the wall, pinned like trophies, were faded photos of the hotel. Some in daylight, some at night, some showing nothing but its dark windows like watching eyes. Frank sat heavily in a chair and looked at me. "You want to know the truth? The Briarwood ain't just haunted. It's a wound. Tear between here and somewhere else. I don't know what. Hell, I don't want to know. But it pulls things through. Always hungry. Always looking." I asked him about the elevator. His face went white. "You saw it, didn't you?" he muttered. "Saw where it leads." I nodded. He took a long drag on his cigarette, then said, "That hallway ain't real. It's not part of the building. It's somewhere below. I lost 2 good men there in '79. We got a call about screams coming from the basement. We went in. Elevator took us down past the lowest floor. Doors opened into that hallway. One of my men stepped out. Doors shut before I could stop him. We never saw him again." His hands shook as he spoke. "The other one, he came back, but he wasn't right. He lasted 3 days before he put his gun in his mouth." The silence that followed was heavy. I asked Frank if he ever tried to close the place down to get it demolished. He laughed bitterly. "You think they haven't tried? Every time something goes wrong, workers get hurt, equipment breaks, owners go bankrupt. That place doesn't want to die." As I left, Frank grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me," he said. "If you hear her voice again, don't follow it. She's not warning you. She's luring you. That woman in white, she's part of it. Just another mask the hotel wears." That night, I sat in my apartment with every light on. I kept the recorder off, afraid of what it might catch this time. The city outside felt different, quieter, like the Briarwood's shadow was stretching over it. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. The bed creaked. The sheets shifted. I refused to look. I sat rigid in the chair, staring at the wall, heart pounding. Then came the voice. Not a whisper this time. Not distant, but right at my ear. "Don't stay." I leapt to my feet, spinning around, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, and yet, in the mirror by the dresser, I saw her, Evelyn, the woman in white. Her reflection stared back at me even though the space beside me was bare. She raised her hand and pointed. Not at me, behind me. I turned. The door to my apartment was wide open. I never heard it unlock, never heard it swing. Just open, waiting. The hallway outside was dark, darker than it should have been. And at the far end, for just a second, I swore I saw a door. Old, wooden, with the tarnished number 210 nailed to it. Then I blinked, and it was gone. I slammed the apartment door shut, locked every bolt, and sat with my back against it until dawn. By then, I knew 2 things. First, whatever this was, it wasn't just tied to the Briarwood anymore. It wanted me wherever I went. Second, if I didn't go back to the hotel soon, it was going to come fully into my world, and I wasn't sure I'd survive that. The decision to go back to the Briarwood felt less like a choice and more like inevitability. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My apartment no longer felt like mine. It felt like an extension of the hotel, a satellite of its darkness. Every shadow stretched too far. Every sound in the hallway outside made me flinch. I realized that no matter where I went, the Briarwood would reach for me. The only way forward was to face it again. So I packed a bag, flashlight, recorder, camera, extra batteries, and, though I wasn't proud of it, a flask of whiskey for courage. The night I returned, the city felt wrong. It wasn't just my paranoia. Something in the air was heavy, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. The streets were unusually empty, even for midnight. It was as if Chicago itself knew where I was going and wanted no part of it. The hotel loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against the cloudy sky. The boards over the side entrance I had used before were gone this time. As if the building had been expecting me, had already made space for my return. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. My flashlight cut through the dark, but the shadows seemed thicker, as if they had substance. The silence pressed close, swallowing even the sound of my footsteps. I moved toward the lobby, recorder running. "I'm back in the Briarwood," I whispered, though my voice shook. "Something followed me home last time. I need to know why." The elevator stood waiting. Its doors were wide open like a mouth. I hesitated, remembering Frank's warning, Marta's trembling voice. But if I didn't go in, I would never know what lay beneath. I stepped inside. The panel glowed faintly, though the building hadn't had power in decades. My hand hovered over the buttons, and before I could press anything, the elevator shuddered and began to descend on its own. Down, past the lobby, past the basement. The numbers blinked nonsense again. 5, 12, 88. As if the elevator was traveling somewhere outside of reality. When it stopped, the doors opened, and there it was, the hallway. Long, endless. Door after door after door, all unmarked, stretching into blackness. The air reeked of earth and rot. My flashlight barely pierced the dark. I stepped out this time. The floorboards groaned under my weight. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if the hallway were far larger than what my eyes saw. Every door I passed looked the same. Plain wood, iron handles, no numbers. But when I pressed my ear to one, I heard something. Whispers. Dozens of voices, layered over one another. Some pleading, some screaming, some chanting words I couldn't understand. I pulled back, heart hammering. Moved to another door. This one was silent until something on the other side scraped against it. Long, slow, deliberate, like claws dragging down the wood. I forced myself to keep going. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but my legs carried me deeper into the dark. The air grew heavier. My flashlight flickered, and then I saw her, Evelyn, the woman in white, standing halfway down the hall, waiting for me. Her pale face expressionless, her hollow eyes fixed on mine. She raised a hand and pointed to a door. Unlike the others, this one bore a tarnished brass number, 210. The same room as before. I whispered into my recorder, "She's here. She's pointing at room 210. My voice cracked. I don't know if she wants me to go inside, or if it's a trap. Evelyn tilted her head, slowly, almost bird-like. Then she placed her hand on the knob and turned it. The door creaked open. Beyond it was only darkness. My pulse thundered. My instincts screamed to run. But I stepped closer anyway, and as I did, Evelyn vanished. One moment she was there, solid, real. The next, gone. The door stood open, waiting. From inside came a sound. Not a whisper, not breathing, but weeping. A woman crying, soft and broken, as if she'd been crying for years. I raised the flashlight, shone it inside. The beam caught a bed, immaculate, perfectly made. Sheets smooth tight. Then the sheets moved. The sound of weeping grew louder. The bed shifted, as though someone invisible was thrashing against it, struggling under the weight of unseen hands. The cries turned to screams, and then the door slammed shut in my face. The hallway shook. All the doors rattled violently, their handles twisting, pounding from the other side. The whispers rose to a roar, 1,000 voices speaking at once, merging into something inhuman. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the recorder. The air grew freezing, so cold I could see my breath pouring out in frantic clouds. And then, all at once, silence. Every door stopped. The air went still. I turned back toward the elevator, but it was gone. Just blank wall where the doors had been. That was when the lights in the hallway began to flicker. One by one, bulbs buzzed to life above me, stretching into the dark. And at the very end of the hall, revealed by that sickly light, was a figure. Not Evelyn. Something much taller, much darker, his body wrong, twisted, as if made from shadow itself. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling, and its arms dragged the floor as it began to move toward me. Slow, deliberate. Each step echoed like thunder. I froze. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, dragging its long arms across the floor. The sound wasn't just scraping, it was tearing, like claws ripping into wood. My flashlight beam trembled in my shaking hand, barely holding on the thing as it came closer. Its body looked like smoke and shadow stitched together, constantly shifting, but its face, God, its face was clear. A hollow mask, featureless except for two deep sockets where eyes should have been. From those sockets, something darker than shadow bled out, like ink spilling into the air. My recorder clicked in my pocket, still running. I fumbled it out with numb fingers, holding it up like some pathetic shield. "Who are you?" I stammered. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the vastness of the hallway. The thing stopped, tilted its head just slightly, and then, without moving its mouth, it answered. Not with words, with screams. Hundreds of them. The recorder buzzed and cracked as if the voices weren't coming through the air but straight into the device, straight into my ears. Screams of men, women, children, raw, jagged, endless. They layered over one another until it was unbearable, until my knees buckled. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't outside, it was inside me. The walls trembled, the floor shook, and the doors along the hallway began to slam open and shut in rhythm with the screams. Through the chaos, one voice rose above the others. A woman's, not terrified but commanding, the same one I'd heard before. "Don't stay." I forced myself to look up. Evelyn stood between me and the figure, faint and flickering like she was made of candlelight. She raised her hand toward it, palm out. The screaming dulled, just slightly, like she was holding it back. Her head turned toward me. "Run." I didn't hesitate. I spun and bolted down the hallway, the shadows warping and shifting around me. Doors banged open on either side. Hands, pale skeletal hands, shooting out to grab me, clutch at my clothes, claw at my skin. I tore free, stumbling forward, lungs burning, heart hammering so hard it felt like it would burst. And then I saw it. The elevator doors, back where they had been, waiting for me, light spilling from inside, golden, almost warm. I sprinted toward it. Behind me, the shadow thing roared, the sound deep and guttural, shaking the walls. Evelyn's flickering form faltered, and I knew she couldn't hold it back much longer. I dove into the elevator. The doors slid shut just as something slammed against them from the other side. Metal groaned. Screeches tore through the air, but the doors held. The elevator lurched violently, sending me crashing to the floor. My flashlight skittered across the tiles, the beam spinning wildly. The numbers above the door blinked in frantic sequence. 5290, before finally, mercifully, landing on L. The doors opened. I spilled out into the Briarwood lobby, gasping for breath. The chandeliers overhead swayed, dust raining down. The building itself seemed to groan in fury. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed my recorder, and staggered toward the exit. The side door I'd come through stood wide open. I didn't look back. Couldn't. I ran into the wet night air, the city lights blinding after the suffocating dark. Only when I reached the corner did I dare glance back. The Briarwood stood silent, empty, windows dark. But in one of them, high on the second floor, I saw her, Evelyn, watching me, her face pale, her expression unreadable. And as I stared, she raised a hand. Not to point, not to beckon, but to wave goodbye. I stumbled home, shaking, the recorder clutched in my fist. I collapsed into a chair and replayed what it had captured. My voice, frantic, the pounding of doors, the roar of the shadow thing. Evelyn's voice, whispering, "Run," and then, something new. After the elevator doors slammed shut, just before the recording cut out, there was another sound. Not screams, not whispers, but laughter. Low, guttural laughter, echoing as if it came from far below. And I knew this wasn't over. The Briarwood wasn't done with me. Not yet. I told myself I wouldn't go back. Not after what I'd seen. For days, I tried to bury myself in normal life. I shut the recorder in a drawer. I left the flashlight and camera untouched in my bag. I went through the motions. Coffee shops, crowded streets, late-night diners. But nothing felt normal anymore. Because the Briarwood had changed me. Started small. My reflection. I catch it moving a second too late. Eyes not quite aligned with mine. Once, in the diner bathroom mirror, I swore I saw someone else standing behind me. A tall shadow. No face. Then came the marks. I woke one morning to find bruises around my wrists, like handprints. Another night, I felt something tighten around my ankle, yanking me halfway off the bed before I snapped awake. My neighbors must have heard me screaming. I tried to rationalize it, sleep paralysis, stress, psychosomatic nonsense. But then I noticed something worse. The laughter. At first it was faint, just a trick of background noise, the low rumble of the city. But it grew clearer, louder. I'd hear it in the static between radio stations, in the hum of my refrigerator at night, in the silence just before I drifted to sleep. That same guttural laugh, echoing from somewhere deep below. I broke down and visited Frank Delaney again. He looked even worse than before. Eyes sunken, skin gray. When I told him what was happening, he shook his head. "You brought it back," he muttered. "I warned you. It doesn't let go once it's touched you." I slammed my notebook on the table. Then how do I stop it? Frank leaned back, dragging a trembling hand down his face. "You don't stop it. You survive it if you're lucky. But once the Briarwood marks you, it's only a matter of time." His words sat heavy in the air. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't just saying it, he believed it. On my way home, I took a different route, hoping the change of scenery might clear my head. The streets were empty, slick with rain. Neon signs buzzed in the distance. I told myself I was fine, that I was imagining the footsteps behind me. But when I turned, there was no one. No one until I looked again, and there it was. Room 210. Not the door itself, but the number, nailed to a boarded-up storefront. Spray painted on the wall of an alley. Scrawled in chalk on the sidewalk. 210. Everywhere I looked, the city wore its mark. I stumbled home in a panic, locked the door, shoved a chair under the knob. I sat in the dark, listening to my own ragged breathing, trying to tell myself I was safe. That's when I heard it, the sound of sheets being pulled tight. I turned slowly toward the bedroom. My door was open. My bed, untouched when I left, was perfectly made. The blanket smoothed flat, corners tucked sharp, as if waiting for me. And then, in the silence, came the sound of breathing. Not mine. Slow, steady. From the bed, I raised the recorder with shaking hands, pressed record, and whispered, "It's here, in my apartment. I don't know what it wants, but it's not leaving." The air grew colder, the breathing stopped, and in its place, a voice. Not Evelyn this time, not a whisper, but the same guttural, laughing voice I'd heard in the hotel. Spoke one word. "Stay." I dropped the recorder. My legs gave out. The room seemed to tilt, the walls bending inward, the shadows stretching long. And when I finally looked back at the bed, there was an indentation in the sheets. This time, it wasn't beside me. It was waiting. Sleep became impossible. Every night, the shadows in my apartment grew darker, thicker, as if the building itself were filling with some substance I couldn't see. Every object seemed slightly out of place in the morning. The air carried that metallic, rotting smell from the Briarwood, faint but undeniable. And the laughter, it never stopped. Always at the edge of hearing, just beyond recognition, like the city itself was mocking me. I tried leaving Chicago, spent a week in Milwaukee, a few days in Detroit, thinking distance might matter. Didn't. Every hotel room I stayed in, every Airbnb, every motel, Even when the lights were blazing and the doors locked tight, I could feel it. Waiting, watching, that same shadow laugh echoing somewhere in the dark. I realized then, the Briarwood wasn't a place anymore. It was a presence, a hunger, and it had chosen me. I became obsessed with finding a way to understand it, to trace its power, to map its patterns. Every record I pulled, every news article, every whispered account, every fragment of testimony, the Briarwood left its mark, and every story contained the same warnings, the same pattern. Room 210, shadows, laughter, and the woman in white, Evelyn. I started sketching maps of the building, layouts pieced together from old photographs, eyewitness accounts, and memory. The floors didn't line up logically. Doors led to nowhere. Staircases looped back on themselves. The building was impossible, a living labyrinth. And then I noticed something terrifying. The hallways in my apartment, in my mind, in the streets, rooms and corridors began appearing where none should exist. One night, returning from the kitchen, I stumbled on a doorway in my own apartment. A simple wooden door with a tarnished number plate, 210. I didn't remember putting it there. I froze, hands trembling. The handle was cold to the touch. I listened. The faintest sound came from the other side. The rustle of sheets. A sigh. A whisper. "Come in," the voice said. Not Evelyn. Not the shadow. But something in between, soft, commanding, patient. I wanted to run. I wanted to smash the door down and flee. But curiosity, fear, and a horrible sense of inevitability pinned me in place. I opened the door. The hallway stretched out before me, exactly as I remembered it in the hotel. Endless doors, shadows stretching impossibly long, the air thick with rot and fear. I stepped forward. The door closed behind me, and then I saw them, figures in white, standing silently along the walls, pale, hollow-eyed, watching me as I moved. And at the far end, something moved differently. Taller, darker. It pulsed, twisted, fluid yet solid. Its head tilted, following me with unseen eyes. I raised my flashlight, but the beam barely touched it. Shadows pooled around it like water, and in its presence, the walls seemed to breathe. I realized then what the Briarwood had become. Not a building, not just a haunt. A living predator using fear itself to trap, to twist reality, to pull people into its endless halls. My recorder clicked on by itself, picking up sounds I couldn't hear, voices screaming, whispering, crying. And then, over it all, that guttural laughter, echoing across impossible distances. And through it all, Evelyn appeared. She floated above the floor, pale, flickering, eyes sad but urgent. She pointed at the dark figure, then back at me. Run. I had to run. But every step forward twisted the hallway, stretched the distance, made the exit recede into darkness. Doors multiplied. Shadows thickened. The laughter grew louder, now surrounding me, inside me. And then a whisper from my own lips. Not my voice. Stay. The Briarwood had reached into me, and I knew it would not let go. Panic overtook me. The hallway warped with every step. Doors multiplied, corridors looped impossibly, and shadows pressed close from every side. The laughter of the Briarwood vibrated inside my chest, a deep, resonant sound that rattled my bones. My flashlight trembled in my hands, the beam slicing through fog that hadn't been there a moment before. I forced myself forward, toward the faint glow at the far end of the hall. There it was, room 210. The door hung slightly open, inviting me, taunting me. My instincts screamed to stop, to turn around, to escape while I still could. But something compelled me, fear, obsession, the need to see it through. The air grew colder, thick and metallic. I could see my breath spiraling in front of me, and with every step, the shadows deepened, reaching toward me, brushing my arms like icy fingers. When I reached the door, I paused. The handle was warm, impossibly so, like it pulsed with life. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. Inside, the room was empty, perfectly preserved, exactly as I had seen it before. The bed was made, the sheets taut, corners tucked sharply. The vanity mirror stood cracked in the corner. The air smelled of mildew, dust, and iron. And then I saw it. The shadow. It rose from the foot of the bed, stretching taller than the ceiling. The figure's shape twisted, shifting like black smoke stitched into something monstrous. Its head tilted as it watched me, the emptiness where its eyes should have been staring directly into my soul. The laughter began again, low and guttural, reverberating off the walls. I raised my flashlight, but it flickered weakly, barely illuminating the creature. Its hands, or whatever they were, stretched toward me, long, thin, and impossibly flexible. The air around it shimmered with heat and cold at the same time. And then Evelyn appeared. She hovered near the mirror, faint and translucent, pale as moonlight. Her eyes locked on me, and she whispered, "No," commanded, "Fight it. Don't let it take you." I clenched my fists, adrenaline pumping. The shadows writhed, coiling around the bedposts, the walls, even the ceiling. The laughter grew into a roar, and I realized that the room itself was alive, trying to crush me beneath its darkness. The shadow lunged. I dodged instinctively, barely moving in time. It collided with the bed, the force shattering the mattress and sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. I scrambled toward the door, but the room shifted, the walls stretching further than they should have. The exit seemed impossibly far. I reached into my bag and pulled out the recorder. Desperate, I pressed record and shouted, "I'm not staying." The shadow froze mid-lunge. It recoiled as if my words cut into it. The laughter momentarily stilled. Evelyn glimmered brighter, her light pushing against the darkness, and I realized she was holding it back, keeping it at bay. But she was fading. I had seconds. I lunged toward the door, shoved against the warped frame, and the shadow surged behind me, a wave of darkness reaching for my legs. Its hands grasped thin air where my body had just been. I slammed the door shut. The hallway beyond quivered. The doors rattled violently, the laughter echoing down endless corridors. My hands were raw against the handle, but I held it closed. And then silence. The hallway stretched empty and still, the shadows retreating. The temperature rose slightly, and for the first time in hours I could breathe. But I knew it wasn't gone. Not really. Evelyn appeared once more, hovering near the open doorway. Her gaze lingered on me, filled with sorrow and warning. She raised her hand. This time, not a wave, not a point, but a plea. "Remember me," she whispered, and then she vanished. I stumbled into the lobby, every muscle shaking. The elevator stood waiting, doors open like a lifeline. I didn't hesitate. I dove inside, slammed the button for the ground floor, and let it carry me away from that room, from that hallway, from the Briarwood itself. When the doors opened, I spilled into the cold night air, lungs burning, heart hammering. I didn't stop running until the city streets felt normal again, or as normal as they could ever be after that. But when I finally slowed, trembling, the wind carried a faint whisper. 210, always 210, and I realized then, with chilling clarity, that the Briarwood would always be a part of me. I thought distance would save me. I thought leaving the city would break its hold. I was wrong. Weeks passed, but the mark remained. 210 followed me like a shadow, seeping into every corner of my life. I saw the number everywhere. On street signs, graffiti on walls, even in the reflection of car windows. Sometimes it appeared in fleeting glimpses. An apartment door, a hotel room, a cracked office window, just for a second before disappearing. The laughter came nightly, a low, guttural echo inside my skull. It woke me from sleep, invaded my thoughts during the day, whispered through the static of every electronic device I owned. I realized I couldn't escape it alone. I contacted Marta again. She had grown pale, thin, anxious. Her voice trembled when she answered the phone. "It's following you," she said before I even explained. "I can feel it. I felt it the day you came home. Do you know how to stop it?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, not really. But there are people who understand it. People who deal with things like this. You won't like them. They're not normal and they don't play by our rules. But maybe they can help you. I met them in an abandoned church on the outskirts of the city. 3 figures waited inside, hooded, silent. They didn't greet me, didn't smile. Only one spoke. A woman with silver hair, eyes sharp and piercing. "You've been touched," she said. "Marked. The Briarwood doesn't release its prey easily. It's not a place, it's a parasite. It latches onto your fear, your memories, your life. You carry it now." I asked what they could do. She held up a hand. The shadows inside the church trembled. "There's a ritual. Dangerous. Painful. Not guaranteed. You'll have to confront it directly. Go back into the Briarwood. Into room 210. Face what it has become. And you must bring light." Light. The word echoed in my head. Evelyn. The woman in white. She had fought it, held it at bay long enough for me to survive. I hadn't understood then, but now I did. Her presence was the light. I agreed. There was no other choice. That night, I returned to Chicago. The streets were familiar, yet distorted, like the city itself had shifted to prepare for my return. The hotel loomed, dark and menacing, waiting. The side door opened at my touch, inviting me, taunting me. Inside, the air was thick with rot and cold, every step echoing unnaturally. Shadows seemed to pulse and writhe around me, whispering, laughing. The elevator carried me down past the basement, past reality, into the endless hallway. Endless doors lined every wall. Every step, the shadows grew, reaching for me. The laughter, guttural and mocking, filled my mind. And then I saw it. The shadow thing, taller, darker, more terrifying than before. It moved with intent, pulsing, shifting, its gaze fixed on me. I raised the small lantern they had given me, the light glowing warm and steady. Evelyn appeared, faint but solid now, hovering near the mirror in room 210. Her hand reached toward the shadow. I stepped forward, into the room. The sheets moved on the bed, curling and stretching like living things. The air was ice. The laughter reached a peak, deafening. I held the lantern high. The shadow shrieked, recoiling, its form twisting in ways that should have been impossible. The laughter turned to a roar, then shrieked, then faltered. Evelyn glimmered brighter, joining my light. Together we pressed forward. The shadow screamed, a sound that clawed at my bones, shattering mirrors, twisting doors, warping walls. And then, with a final guttural scream, it dissipated. The room fell silent. Evelyn floated, pale and flickering, and whispered, "Remember me. Never forget what you've seen." And then she was gone. I stood alone in room 210. The bed lay still. The mirror cracked. The air smelled of dust and iron. The hallway beyond was empty. Doors were still. Shadows receded. The elevator waited, ordinary now, numbers blinking normally. I left the Briarwood for the last time. I stepped out of the Briarwood into the cold night air. The city was quiet, ordinary. Neon signs buzzed. Cars passed. People walked without noticing me, without noticing anything strange. For the first time in months, I felt free. But the weight of what I had endured pressed on me. The memory of the shadows, the laughter, the endless hallway, and Evelyn's pale, flickering form. I knew the Briarwood's reach was long, but its hold had been broken for now. Back in my apartment, I placed the recorder on the table. I pressed play, listening to the echoes of my ordeal. The footsteps, the sheets moving, the guttural laughter. And then, silence. No whispers, no voices, no commands. I sank into a chair, exhausted beyond measure, and let the stillness wash over me. The city outside my window felt alive, breathing normally. I could hear real life again. The distant sirens, the hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog. For the first time in months, I slept. Days passed. Weeks. I avoided mirrors, avoided abandoned buildings, avoided shadows that stretched too long. But slowly, the terror ebbed. I returned to normal routines, coffee shops, work, human connection. The mark faded, not erased, but diminished. A scar hidden beneath the surface. I never returned to the Briarwood. Never tried to write the story. I knew some things were meant to remain unseen. Some doors never opened, some corridors never explored. And yet, sometimes, when the night is quiet and the city hums beneath me, I swear I hear a faint laughter, a soft whisper, 210, and I remember, Evelyn, the shadows, the hallway that should not exist, the bed that moved by unseen hands. I survived, but the Briarwood did not forget me, and I will never forget it.